Because his harm, if there's an illegal president, a usurper exercising all the powers of the president, his harm would be no different from the harm everybody else in the country would have, and so he has no standing. That's an absurd judicial doctrine, and it needs to be, it's made up by the judiciary. They need to drop that when the question, the underlying question, is a constitutional question. So it may be, but only the courts can answer the larger question of the meaning of those words, and only Mr. Obama can settle the question of how many birth certificates he has and that sort of thing. Yes, ma'am.
Cindy Ochowski with a Hispanic outlook, and I write a lot about immigration. The 14th Amendment has pretty much been used, validly or not, to justify that anyone born in the United States, no matter what their citizenship is, a natural citizen, who is a citizen. The whole idea of dual and triple citizenship, I don't think is addressed in the Constitution, because I don't think such a thing existed before. So I'm wondering, wasn't this case originally more about the fact that there was not a valid birth certificate, that there was a possibility he was not born in the United States, and that was the only cause for this case? Because I don't see where there's a case if it's a matter of what citizenship he has.
There are multiple cases. The D'Onofrio case asks the court to, and only the court can define the meaning, can interpret the meaning of those words, natural-born citizen. What does it mean? What do those words mean? Only the court can provide that interpretation. The other cases... Again, ma'am, but there is a difference between citizen. Hopefully we're all citizens, okay? Well, it doesn't matter, but there's a difference between citizen and natural-born citizen. That's the key. And we need to get that interpretation.
The existence of multiple citizenship of a child invalidates the natural-born.
Not necessarily. But this issue of dual citizenship, you're right. It is not addressed in the Constitution, and it is of concern. You can have a citizen of another country and be a citizen here, be voting in the other country on policies that favor that country, and voting here for policies that favor that country, and it's just not right, I think. But that's a separate issue, the issue of dual citizenship. Keep in mind, the question here is natural-born citizen, and these other lawsuits, besides Mr. D'Onofrio's, are simply trying to get to the bottom of really where was he born? Was it in Kenya? Was it in Hawaii? Is his citizenship in Indonesia, and so forth? Yes, ma'am.
A little over 2 years ago. A little over 2 months.
Runner-up to the Nobel Peace Prize.
Probably.
I've had ears to the wall.
And
I have some questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wonder if you might take the microphone, because unfortunately it's only this mic that's hooked up to the camera in the back. Okay. Get that out. Thank you.
It's been a real honor to meet Phil, and I've been helping to connect the dots wherever I can. And Shelley Baker from Morning Song Radio. And what I said was, I first got a call on August 23rd that I should check into this story about Phil Berg from Israel. Had it not come from Israel, I probably would have ignored it. And the woman who called me is a frequent guest at the Pentagon with high-ranking officials, people that are household names to you in world media and world news and world governments. And we both studied with Shulamit Katz-Nelson for 12 years, who came in runner-up to the Nobel Peace Prize. So I've heard a lot of things and seen a lot of things that many probably don't have a chance to do. And I would be willing to testify that indeed the media has been corrupted by foreign oil money, because I brought back a signed interview from Mike Ginsberg at the foremost security kibbutz at Mitzgavam, and the man at the Spring Leader in Missouri who excitedly took it said, "I'll win a Pulitzer Prize for this," and joked with me. 2 days later, he lost his job to report to me that the reason was because he could not print something like that, even though it was a signed interview with video footage and witnesses, because it didn't come off on a world newswire that was owned by Arab oil money through the Dubai company. A couple of years later, I was present talking to Shulamit Katz-Nelson and Shulamit Shamir, and I addressed 11 cabinet members. And I heard things that night also about the oil money in some closed chambers where Gene Kilpatrick and others have often gone. I just laid it on the shelf. In 1998, I was given shares of oil stock at a meeting where the heads of Exxon and Mobil, who had retired, were discussing their political agenda for a coming election. I would be happy to provide names and the things that they said. And this was all concerning oil in Iraq, Iran, Dubai, and Saudi Arabia, and the man that developed the pipelines for a bipartisan bite in this. If you notice during the elections what began to happen while we were focusing on the tight race, suddenly our economy toppled. And when it did, I immediately began to think of something I had seen at the time I was investigating where his scholarship money came from at Harvard, because I had been the founder of Boston Bless Israel a year ago at the State House that Mitt Romney awarded me the use of. It was a historical event, and at that time I had in my hands the Obsession video that was compiled of Arab television clips, and one of them was 2 clerics telling that they predicted in the next election that the White House would become the Black House of Muslim prayer and Sharia law. And my antenna went up. And then I had been present with some people that were informing me about the Dubai port incident that almost led to impeachment proceedings and quickly died down. This suddenly resurfaced 2 days ago. I was in the World Bank on Pennsylvania Avenue here the day that the Asian markets fell, not as a media but as a diplomatic guest, or I would have never been invited, and I may not ever get to be allowed to come back after saying this. And I heard and saw things on a surreal level of people who handle billions and even trillions of dollars that care nothing for the pawns on the chessboard of people like us deciding over an election and whether a constitution stands. And a few years ago, I interviewed John Ashcroft in Mansfield, Missouri, in a packed-out plaza of farmers, and I put a mic in his face at the end. He was a friend of mine, and I said, "John, tell me about helping to author the NAFTA." He ran to his car. I came back to the other side. He was red-faced. He said, "If you want to talk to me about this, call me at my office." When he left, all the farmers bawled me out and said, "What'd you do that to a nice guy like that for? This is just conspiracy." Well, we lived through the NAFTA. A couple of days ago, in the news, surfaced another story about the Dubai oil money. And what it surfaced was to AIG, the largest recipient of the bailouts, $780 billion worth of bailouts, now has come Sharia law compliant mortgage money. And London just suffered the first Sharia law court, and the Netherlands have been screaming about it from the government and the news. So people fighting for their homes, as Barack Obama has prophesied, predicted in the last few days, it's going to get worse before it gets better, may well be facing a full-fledged worldwide conspiracy, bipartisan, with judges who go to The Hague to learn how to dismiss our Constitution on the Supreme Court to become part of the World Court. I have sat over in Malaysia in the Palace of the Golden Horses with the King's courtiers, and it goes on and on and on to back up what I'm saying. I think we need to look a lot farther when this is over to a lot of indictments on a bipartisan level. And what in the world did the former Secretary of State have business saying when he shifted out of his Republican Party, where he could have well first been the very first black candidate of the Republican Party and won like Eisenhower? What did he mean on the evening news that night when he said, "What's the matter with a Muslim in the White House?" Remember the clerics on the Obsession video that I just told you about. And he said, "Shouldn't every 8-year-old Muslim immigrant child have the right to grow up and dream about becoming President of the United States?" No, their children could.
I might ask if you would, a lot of what you've just said went right over my head. Sorry, I'm just not close to these issues. But if you wouldn't mind preparing an affidavit with exhibits, naming names and whatnot, and provide that, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir. Could you? Yes.
Hello, I'm James Wright with the Afro-American newspaper. I'm a part of the media, and I don't know whether we get oil money. But here's my question. question. I'd like to know from Mr. Berg and from you, sir, you and from you, ma'am, what is the status of your lawsuits in regards to challenging Barack's eligibility to be president?
Mine's easy. We have none. Phil? Status.
Sure. The status, in my case, I have a writ of certiorari pending before the United States Supreme Court. The filing deadline was December 1st for the Democratic National Committee, Barack Obama, and other defendants to respond. The FEC, the Federal Election Commission, responded about a week and a half before that, saying they wouldn't respond. To date, there's been no response. What happens, even though the December 1st, by any other defendants, the December 1st date is like a deadline date, but then they give them several more days for mailing, in case, but there's been nothing filed. There's been at least one friend of the court brief filed. I thought there was 2 or 3 more because I've received copies. Friend of the court supporting our position. And my position is I'm waiting for the Supreme Court to grant me standing in the case. We should be all